Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another frames discussion. I'm really looking forward to today's topic. We are going to be talking about the development of young men in our community. I know masculinity has been a big topic in the past few months, femininity in the Muslim community especially. And so really excited to have Ustadh Arthur Richards joining us for today's conversation, along with Ustadh Ubaydullah. So before we get started, I just wanted to make a couple announcements that, alhamdulillah, we just wrapped up our 2022 summer ALIM program. There were over 40 students, I believe, who graduated from this year's summer program. They engaged in classes like sectarianism, Islam in America, hadith and gender criticism, and they built communal bonds through qiyams, field trips, fasting together, group projects, sports, and meeting Muslims in the Chicago area. And I saw all the pictures and videos. It looked like an amazing program this year. I was kind of sad that I couldn't join. But alhamdulillah, there's already traction going for this upcoming year. So if you're interested in getting more information about next year's ALIM program for 2023, or you think somebody else might be interested, then you can fill out the interest form. We're going to post the link in the chat for that. You can fill out the interest form to get more information and more updates when we release information on the program, inshallah. And you can also check out videos and testimonials from students from this past year and other years who've attended ALIM's program. Another announcement that we wanted to make is that we still have our monthly book club with Ustadh Ubaydullah going. So it's every last Wednesday of the month. So next week, inshallah, they will be reading Futuwa by Imam Dawood Walid, which is his new book that he just released on the topic of manhood, masculinity, things like that. So he tied the topics together, inshallah. And you can register for that on our website. And we will also share the link in the chat for registering for the book club. And I haven't been able to attend many of them, but I have attended a few of them, and they're really fruitful discussions. Ustadh Ubaydullah shares his opinions and thoughts, and different people come from all over the country sharing their opinions and thoughts on different topics. Sometimes they read fiction, nonfiction, self-help, Islamic books, all of the above. So definitely check that out if you are a reader or you're trying to get back into reading. And again, that is next Wednesday, inshallah. And we just always want to encourage you to donate to ALIM's program. We are a nonprofit, and everything that we do, everything that we do is off of your support and your du'as and everything like that. So we will get started very shortly. I want to just introduce our guest for this month. So let me pull up his bio quickly. Right, here we go. So this month we have Ustadh Arthur Richards joining us. He is a father of two, a BJJ practitioner. He's a runner, writer, student, and teacher at Markaz Imam Malik, which is an institute for creating jurists in the Maliki school. He studied Sharia in Masjid al-Azhar and translated fatwa at the Dar al-Iftah of Egypt. And he currently works as the chief marketing and analytics officer at Mecca Books. He also runs several he's big on social media, where he talks a lot about different topics such as masculinity, Islam, and how Muslims in America, but also just Muslims in general, should live their lives. And I've just been really inspired by his content. And so that's why I was really excited to bring him on this month, inshallah. So without further ado, I'll bring him up, and then we will bring Ustadh Ubaydullah on in just a few moments. So Ustadh Arthur, if you'd like to get started and, kind of talk about how you got into this topic of developing young men in the community, and then Ustadh Ubaydullah will join in a few short moments, inshallah.
Awesome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barik ala sayyidina wa maulana wa habibina wa shafi'una rasul rabbil alameen. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد صلاة تخرجنا بها من ظلمات الوهم وتكرمنا بها بالنور الفهم وتوضح بها أن ما أشكل حتى يفهم أنك تعلم ولا نعلم وأنت ألام الغيوب ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم. So yeah, it's an honor to be with you guys and to discuss this topic, to talk about developing young men, and you know, as Sister Sabria was just mentioning, I kind of talk about some of these topics here and there on social media. And one of the reasons why anyone talks about any of these topics, whether it be on their blogs, social media, in person, is because it's something that usually affects them, right? It's something that usually, um, in some way, shape, or form, um, something has pushed them to decide to take that particular topic on. And masculinity, aside from all of the various things that are going on in our societies and communities right now, is something that is an important topic to me because first of all, I'm a very vulnerable and very open person, and I think it's important to preface and to mention that I've gone through a lot of different things, as many of you have, and other individuals, and I've realized time and time again that I have a difficult time being a man, right? I have a difficult time doing the things that I need to do, right? And I kind of came to the conclusion that, whoa, you know what? I have a lot of weaknesses. I have a lot of difficulties that I have, and I need to figure out how to fix these. I need to figure out how um, do I come into my being as a Muslim man, right? And the best version of a Muslim man that I can potentially be. And one of the things that kept glaring at me, one of the realities that I kept noticing was that I didn't have a qabila, right? I didn't have um, yani, many role models that were around me. I grew up, of course, with my father, and may Allah guide him and bless him. He's an amazing individual, um, still alive. May Allah bless him and guide him to Islam. Um, but he was a immigrant to the U.S. and had to work very hard to allow me to be where I am today, and I thank him for that. But aside from that, I was really raised around um, a lot of women, right? And one of the first things that I'll even say about this topic was that Allah, 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 madad, madad.
لا لا،
Assalamu
انت
alaikum.
المدد، انت المدد. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. ما شاء الله, ما شاء
الحمد
الله.
لله. How are you, Ustadh Arthur?
Wallahi, alhamdulillah, I am great. I am great. Even happier now that I'm seeing your face, mashallah.
MashaAllah.
Mashallah.
Your happiness cannot compare to my own, I'm sure. I
Mashallah.
assure you.
Mashallah. Mashallah.
I actually don't want to stop you because you were, mid profundity. You were in the midst of something very profound.
Allahu alam. Allahu
Um,
alam.
I could actually overhear you as I was helping my son with his homework,
Mashallah.
um, mentioning your own vulnerability and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
beginning to describe
Yeah.
where your interest in this topic,
Yeah.
uh, emanates from.
Yeah.
What has led to your interest in the topic? And you had arrived to the place. First, you acknowledged your father, Hadahullah, may Allah guide him,
Amin ya Rab.
and um, we certainly thank him for giving us the jewel that you are, mashallah. And we know that you must have benefited from his
100%.
model, you know, in
100%.
in in many and perhaps incalculable, ways.
100%.
Um, but you were saying that you grew up around a lot of women, right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
that's where you were. I mean, if it were up to me and time were not of the essence, we would have probably spent the first 20 minutes just exchanging pleasantries, and I would be telling you how much I, enjoy your writing. I read the
Allah
piece
bless you.
that you wrote for Muslim Matters about that barbaric man that attacked a woman, and everybody sat
Mm,
by looking without saying anything.
yeah. Yeah.
Just uh, unspeakable, unconscionable.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
happened to the concept of rujula, in
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
ummah, and also I think it's fitting to mention that we both have a connection to Al Azhar. I'm an Azhar
and I read in your bio that you also studied at Ashab. But
Heard a lot about you.
no, yeah, I really left, and then on top of that, I mean, you're also, a handsome dark skinned brother, which, uh, is
Allah
also
bless you. Allah
something
bless
for
you.
which, we have a shared affinity, mashallah. But
Allah bless you.
enough of the pleasantries. I really want to get into the meat of this topic because I think it is rich, important, and germane. I think it's really relevant. So
Yeah.
continue from where you were, man, as you were. I'm just gonna close my window because the cicadas are really
No
kicking up.
problem. Of course.
One
Of
second.
course. No problem at all. No problem at all. Um, I mean, yeah, I'll jump in, where I was. And in essence, I had been raised and grew up around a lot of women. And, at the time, of course, you grow up and, in that, that type of environment, you don't really think twice about it, right? You're not thinking about things like, oh, how do I learn as a man to regulate my emotions,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's not a thought that comes to your mind,
No.
right? Rather, you're just seeing, hey, these are how everyone else regulates their emotions, and
Hmm.
this is how I do it as well. This is how I take care of myself. And sometimes you even longingly, right, look at other young men around you, right, and you wonder, like, how do they have guys as friends, right? How do they have these social structures that you feel internally like, hey, I want that, right?
Hmm.
um and so I grew up with that, and alhamdulillah, came into Islam over a decade ago, and obviously had to make a lot of life changes. But over the last, say, 5 6 years, stumbling here and there, roadblocks here and there, stumbling over and over, I came to realize that, well, I really need some men around me, right?
Hmm.
And I'd reach out every once in a while, from a very vulnerable state, and I'd reach out to some people and say, hey, I really need your guidance. I really need your help. I really need your mentorship. And one thing I'll tell you, even in business, when it comes to mentorship, is you can't just ask for mentorship. They need to see that there's some benefit to mentoring you. And sometimes I couldn't bring any benefit, right? I was just in need. Right. And finally, at the end of it, just to come, to the point here, is I realized that I'm gonna have to make that circle. I'm gonna have to make that qabila. I'm gonna have to
Allah,
make that
Allah.
group of men.
Mm.
And I kind of just started saying, I was on social media a bit. I started changing the content that I was creating, getting a little more vulnerable, and I started realizing that a lot of men were resonating with that, which to me was weird, right? Because I'm thinking,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
supposed to be like,
yeah.
supposed to be really strong, and there's
Sure,
no
sure,
vulnerability
sure.
here. But yet, every time there's a vulnerable piece that comes out, there's a bunch of men that are like, yeah, I feel that. I'm
Mm.
there, right?
Yeah, man, it's interesting because, you know, I really grew up, um, among a fatherless generation. You
Hmm.
know, um,
Hmm. Hmm.
one of the things that I think black men in particular should be commended for is we have reasserted the importance of fatherhood. Um,
Hmm.
I remember, um, this was a long time ago. I mean, I've been Muslim for about 20 years. I don't look at you. I don't look at
No,
you.
you don't. You don't.
But no, but I've been Muslim for about 20 years, and I converted to Islam when I was a teenager. And I remember in my neighborhood, a person could sit in a barber shop and
Hmm.
make a wisecrack or a joke about abandoning a woman that
Hmm.
informed him that she was carrying his child, and people would
Hmm.
laugh. This was
Hmm.
maybe, like I said, a little over 20 years ago.
Hmm.
She called, said that, she was pregnant. I changed my number, and the barber shop would
Yeah, I know what you're
erupt in
talking about.
laughter,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
I remember this,
Yep. Yep.
as a kid of the neighborhood, and something changed.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, in those same barbershops, in those same neighborhoods, in those same places, if a person is an absentee father or
Hmm.
a negligent or derelict father, that will earn him the scorn of his peers, the
True.
scorn of the men of his neighborhood, the
True.
scorn of the men of his family. So I think that this is a reaction to us growing up without male role models, without fathers, and knowing the critical importance of male role models. So
100%.
fatherhood, and by extension, masculinity and manhood is something that I think my generation takes quite seriously. It is no laughing matter. It is no, and now that we find ourselves, in these positions, I'm a father to 3 children. My eldest
Wow.
is 16, mashallah.
Allah.
You
MashaAllah.
know, and my son will soon be 8, mashallah. And my youngest daughter is 7, and I'm a husband, mashallah. And I find that there is a lot of places that I'm just unschooled. I'm just
Allah.
uninitiated,
صح.
underdeveloped. I lack a certain familiarity, right? And I see that sometimes, in my experience, it's really, really glaring, right? I'll give you one example, and then we can just riff. We can just kind of go back and forth in the jazz tradition. We're just on the bandstand. We're just on the bandstand. My daughter this year, this summer, she studied in Morocco for an Arabic intensive. And there was something she wanted to have done with her hair before she left. And I didn't agree to the style. I was like, no, I mean, now I won't put my daughter way out there. But me personally, and it's just a preference. I'm not connecting ideology to it, but I don't like chemically straightened hair.
I feel you on that.
Right? It's not my. I don't like. I'm not saying it's haram. I'm not saying that a person that does it is engaged in some kind of self-loathing. I'm much more on the India RE. I am not my hair kind of minhaj, right? I'm on that minhaj, but it's just my preference. I like natural hair on Black women, Black girls, Black men. So my daughter really wanted to straighten her hair. And I was like, nah, I'm not really feeling it. And of course, she was saying, well, I'm 16. I get to decide what I want to do.
Gotta assert herself. Yeah.
She's asserting herself and individuating is what I've been taught this process is, right? I said, I'm not really feeling that. And no, you can't get that done. So she started to have a full out meltdown, right? And as she was having this meltdown, at some point, I just said, "Listen, I'm not going to listen to this. I have some things to do," and I was about to walk away. And my wife said to me, "Ubayd, you need to sit back down because she needs to know that she can count on a male's support. She can count on a male's loving comfort when she's melting down, being apoplectic, and losing it. And if she doesn't experience that from her father." She won't know that she should be able to experience that from her husband.
You speaking some truth right now.
She was getting into her thing. She was emotional. And I was like, "Hey man, look, I'm not about to sit here and listen to this, man. Look, I got something to do. When you calm down and you want to talk to me, okay, call me and I'll come back. But and she said, no, obey this. And I realized in that moment, I had never seen my father sit with my mother as she was expressing strong emotion and being a pillar of stability, support, stillness, calm, tranquility in the midst of this emotional storm. And that's what I'm saying. Unschooled things that this get too crazy.
You're speaking so much truth right now, because I'll tell you that just today, right? So I woke up this morning and I said to myself, okay, today you got to be different, right? And the reasoning for that is because this past week, I would say this past month has been quite difficult. I've had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of rough patches, a lot of things going on. And I came to this realization where I reminded myself, I have this thing where it's called meds, right? So it's muraqaba, exercise, diet, and sleep, right? And I go back to this all the time as to, okay, when I'm feeling off, right? How are these doing? How are my meds? Right? Have I sat down with myself, right, and looked at my day internally, really sat down. And the thing is, we as men, we don't like being alone. We don't like thinking. We don't like being on our thoughts. Like, I don't want to do that. Right? We like to talk about the Prophet ﷺ being in Al-Hira and you know, and these things, and like, wow, you know, mashallah, it's amazing. You know, it's like, man, you spend 5 minutes by yourself where there is nobody and nothing. Right? I've heard stories of men going into the wilderness because they heard it was something cool and left crying.
Allahu Akbar.
Because they can't do it. They've never been with something. There has to be sound. There has to be television. There has to be text messaging. There has to be Instagram. There has to be TikTok. There has to be something else other than me and my thoughts. Right? And you know, I always, you know, there's this concept of radical acceptance that goes around nowadays, right? Like, I need to completely accept myself for who I am. And I like to flip that a little bit and talk about radical awareness. Like, are we even aware of ourselves?
Allahu Akbar.
And as men, I think we really, really need to spend time with ourselves and just be aware, right? Like you talk about, you talked about this like reacting, right? And what happens is a lot of times when men are in that situation, right, they're around a woman, they're around their mother, spouse, whoever it may be, and you know that the voice goes a little, you know, starts going a little bit higher, right? That fight or flight mode comes in, right? And at that moment, we're not aware, right? We're not sitting there trying to ground ourselves, take a deep breath, right? Exactly. Just take it in for a moment, right? And then respond. No. It's like, no, I'm about to, let's go. All right. Let's
Yeah,
You
exactly.
gonna bring it? I'm gonna bring it too. Let's go. Right. And then it just turns into this shouting battle of, okay, well, who can be louder? Well, of course I am. Of course I can be louder.
Sure.
I'm a man. This is how I will assert and show you my manliness, my masculinity. Right. And it's like, no, that's not what needs to happen here. Right. What needs to happen is I need to get in tune with myself and be able to right? Right? That's what needs to happen at that moment. But that's really hard if you're not aware. That's really hard if you can't take a moment and realize where you are.
Say that. No, it's deep that you say that. You know, when I think about masculinity, I think, you know, things are known through their opposites. And, you know, I was reading one feminist writer, and she was very critical of the idea of gender generally, saying that she was saying, you know, the idea of masculinity in and of itself is patriarchal, right? Saying that like the idea that men have characteristics that essentially differentiate them from women is in and of itself a problematic idea. And I remember thinking to myself, I think this is the consequence of being in a society where the further you move from white, middle class, or above, heteronormative, male, you just get more, and you're getting further away from the center in which one's humanity is recognized.
Yeah.
You see, you're getting further and further, and as you move further away from that center, the center of this society, you can be abused. You're, to use Ruth Gilmore's expression, you're subjected to premature death. Things happen to you, right? Your humanity is called into question the further you get away from that. And I was thinking, this is such a different worldview than that of Muslims. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, right? We have ennobled all of the children of Adam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِندَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. Right? Oh, humanity, we made you from one male and one female And then we spread you into nations and tribes. Lita'arafu. So in our worldview, differentiation between men and women, between people of different ethnicities, different languages, different complexions, even different belief systems. This is all a sign of God's creative power. And that nobody along that spectrum has jeopardized their humanity except people who behave immorally, men, women, whatever. They become worse than Baha'im. They become worse than beast. Not by virtue of any essential identifiers, male, female, black, white, Arab, Ajam. No, but by virtue of your conduct. So we approach this topic without the fear that men and women being different somehow entails that men are better than women, or that men are entitled to more than women, or it's like that's not our point of departure. So differentiation, right, and by extension masculinity itself being something different from femininity, this becomes something we're able to celebrate, something we're able to esteem, not something we feel like we have to erase so that people treat it fairly and equitably.
And you say this, and I'm sure you know this, but there are so many men who are in fact trying to erase that masculinity and don't realize that they're doing that because they feel a level of shame almost nowadays. There's so many young men that I talk to. So, one of the things that I've done is I decided I need that qabila, that group around me, that, so I created this well, I mean, now it's about 150 plus, men, but, we created this group, and this is something I hear all the time with them, with other men, like this concept of not even knowing, is it okay for me to feel this way?
Yes.
Right? Yes. It's like, what? This is the most basic, innate, reaction that a man would have. It's like, well, but I've heard it's not right. And it's like, well, where did you hear it's not right?
Right. So how?
Right. So and again, it comes back to this concept of, what we entertain ourselves with, right? The groups and the places that we socialize in, right? Hearing this constant notion that masculinity in and of itself is toxic, right? Patriarchy in and of itself is something that is negative, right? And so when you continuously hear this over and over and over and over, you begin to you're hearing it. You're like, okay, well, I guess something is wrong.
You take it in,
right?
Yeah.
Like I'm there's something wrong with me, right? And this is something that I'll share with you that I mean, this is hard to share, and but I would say if it's not every week, it's every 2 weeks that I have a young man telling me, look, I'm ready to just end it. I'm ready to just end it. Right. I'm talking Muslim men.
Yeah, sure.
Age 16, 17 to 38. All right.
Wow.
And it scares me sometimes. I'm like, whoa. Where is this coming from? Right. And a lot of times, I mean, these are, young men that it might be a relationship, right? That, things happened and that shame has set in, that guilt has set in, that, what am I going to do? The future, the concept that, that, as they say, when you think of the past, it ends up in resentment. When you think of the future, it ends up in fear. Right. And so they have this concept. I'm just fearful. What's going to happen to me now? Right. I saw so much. I saw a future that I could have had, and now khalas, it's gone. Right. And then you have this concept of older individuals, just the weight of the world that they're carrying on them, right? And they don't know how to deal with it anymore. They've never learned. Actually, they didn't have the tools to begin with, right? To be able to deal with it, right? And so there's a lot of men that are out there right now that are handling and trying to figure out how to live, how to have these tools, and they're being told, such as what you were just mentioning from this particular author, this writer, right, that they are innately bad, right? There's just something wrong with them, right? There's just something wrong with them, and they this Islamic framework that you now are mentioning, they can't see it.
Mm-mm.
It's like there's this haze, there's this hijab, there's this block that's there,
Mm-mm.
and they just
But
can't get
see,
to it.
I get it though. Like whenever I encounter um, people that are in that haze, right? They're in the midst of that fog. I can identify with them
Hmm,
because
hmm.
I mean a lot of the women, especially that are in that fog, that have given up any hope in kind of a positive masculinity, because as a black man, if white people attempt to talk to me about things that supposedly make me different than them, even if those things are mentioned in the guise of compliments, right? I can
Hmm.
still detect in them
Oh yeah.
something demeaning, right? It's
Oh yeah.
like, everybody's seen a movie with the Magic Negro, right? So he's simple, he's closer to nature,
Hmm.
he has this, you know, um, uh, almost enchanted kind of approach to life. He's usually an impoverished person or somebody
Hmm.
working in, an honorable labor position. But
Yeah.
it's almost like they're attempting to esteem him as being different than they are, with all
Yeah.
of their complexity and all of these, deep existential crises that they're having. He just doesn't
Yeah.
have any of that, and he's closer to
Yeah.
nature, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so demeaning,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
so demeaning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I totally understand that when men start talking about differences between men and women might hear in that,
Yeah. Yeah. What you
so
mean?
what you mean, right? What you mean more emotionally in tune? Oh, that's just a nicer way of saying irrational. Okay, okay, I see. I see what you mean. What do you mean? Et cetera, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I was thinking about the the um, the verse in which Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, "هو الذي رفع بعضكم فوق بعض درجات ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم." That is,
Yeah.
it is God who raised some of you above others in rank to
Yeah.
test you in what He's given you. Now,
Yes.
one of the most interesting things about this ayah is that it doesn't say that He raised men above women.
So.
It doesn't say that He raised women above men. It doesn't
Hmm.
say that He raised rich people above poor people.
Yep.
Doesn't say He raised poor people above some of you above others. And when I was looking at the tafsir of this ayah, one of the most interesting things I found was that in different facets of all of our lives, we
Hmm.
have positions of advantage over other people.
Yes. Yep.
Women, men, all of us. When I
Yes.
take my car to my mechanic, he has a position of advantage over me. If he wants
صحيح.
to cheat me, he can. I don't know anything
صحيح.
about cars. I mean, I like them, but beyond that, I don't know anything about them. Right? Similarly, there are ways that if my wife wants to take advantage of me, if she wants to
Hmm.
treat me badly, Allah has given her a place of um, um, privilege in
Yeah.
certain kinds of interactions that if she wants to, she
Yes.
can. And similarly, men are given at times certain kinds of privilege,
Yes.
certain kinds of advantage that if they are used immorally, if
Yes.
they are used incorrectly, can be very detrimental to women. But those
100%.
same things, if used intentionally,
Yeah. Yep.
consciously, in a self aware way, can be of great benefit to women.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And that's for me when we're talking about masculinity, that's what it's all about.
Subhanallah, when you talk about this concept of men having, in some cases, this privilege, this is, I would say, a major story nowadays, right? This is a major issue nowadays because you do have a lot of individuals, a lot of men who have messed up, right?
Oh, for
And they
sure.
have caused a lot of hurt and a lot of issues, right?
Mhm.
I'm not impervious to that, right? And
You're not.
what ends up happening there is sometimes going back to that hijab and that haze, right? When a person has messed up, just like a child, when a child messes up, right, and it's like, what did you just do? What's the reaction of that child,
Shame. Shame. Yeah. Shame.
right?
Hmm.
And right now, that's exactly the point that I was making. Is that that's where we stopped. A lot of men have just stopped right there.
Yeah.
I'm
Shame.
ashamed. I
Hmm.
messed up.
Hmm.
That's it. I can't move forward now. That's
Yeah,
it.
I can't move
It's
forward.
done.
Yeah.
Right. And my message, at least for one, I have to say for myself, even before anyone else, was like, no. Right. This is what Jaddid Tawbah. Right. This is
Mhm.
the, whether it's a kharid or it's I think it's a kharid al bahiyya, right? He mentions that at the very end, in this section of the kharid al bahiyya, this text on aqidah, he mentions to renew your tawbah, right?
You
And
told.
this is where you're renewing your repentance, right? You messed
Mm.
up. Oh yeah, this is not the end, right?
No.
وَسِرْ لِمَوْلَاكَ بِلَا تَنَائِ, right?
Mm.
Now go towards your Lord, but don't stop here. This is not the end of your story. And I
Not
think
the
a
end.
lot
It's
of
not
men,
the end.
they're stuck. They're like, no, I can't move forward. No, Habibi, you have a long
You have a
journey to
long
go.
way to go. So I think what I hear you saying is that to acknowledge the hurt, acknowledge the harm that has been caused in the name of masculinity or in the name of
Yes,
maleness, or at the very least has been perpetrated by males.
yes,
But that does not mean that you should relinquish masculinity. In
yes,
fact,
exactly.
the task is how do we redeem masculinity,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
How do we restore masculinity,
Yeah,
right?
and that comes from accepting, like, yeah, I was wrong. We were wrong. We messed up in some cases, right? And when you're able to do that, right, like a I don't know, sports. Yeah, I do, as I mentioned in
I'm, I'm,
in
I'm,
the
look, I'm a
intro.
huge sports fan, so
All right
anywhere
then.
you
All
want to
right.
go
All right.
there,
All right. All right. All right. But whether you're playing football, right? You're playing, you're a basketball player. Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There's this saying that is on the wall in my UFC gym, where it's like there is no losing. You just learn,
that's it. The
right?
only
And
L's we
like,
take are lessons.
right, it's lesson exactly. And
Hmm.
it's like I remember seeing that the first time, and that statement hit home.
That
It
that's
hit
a, that
home.
that's like al hikmah dalatul mu'min. That's like
Aywa.
that's a very Muslim. The only L's we take are lessons, bro.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
Lessons.
like, see, that's what you have to do now as a man. You have to realize, like, okay, yeah, you messed up, but that's a lesson. Now, how did you learn from it?
Allahu
Right?
Akbar.
How did you
Allahu
learn
Akbar.
from it? Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, for the men that are going to be listening to this and the men that are listening to this, that's the question you need to take home. Okay, you've messed up, but now how do you take lessons from that and learn and move forward so that you can get that A, right, in
Mhm.
that class that you were just put in?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can still pass with a C. I mean, we can work it out, but like, how
Sure.
do we get to that C?
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Um, yeah. So that's something that I think is extremely important. And yeah, it's having role models, right, to help see individuals who have failed, right. And this is one of
Mhm.
the reasons why we like superheroes, right. This is one of the reasons
Right.
why
The hero's journey.
exactly this is why we love it.
Mhm.
Look at him, he failed, but look how much
Mhm.
stronger he is now.
Of
Look how
course.
he was able to get through those trials and those tribulations, and now everybody loves him, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm a little bit of a nerd, I'll admit it, right? So there's this
No, no, but good thing for you, you're talking to a nerd.
alhamdulillah, right?
Alhamdulillah.
So like I have this little love for this one particular anime. It's called Naruto, and you have this central character, like most shows, right, where he's despised, he's disliked, he in fact has led to a lot of harm, not of his own
Mhm.
intention, but due to some circumstances around him,
Mhm.
around his birth and whatnot. And so he grows and goes through his entire life just being hated by everyone around him in this village that he's in, and he just decides at some point that, you know what, I'm going to lead this village one day. Right? I'm going to lead this village. Right? And so he continues going through these hardships and passing these hardships, and sometimes failing them, by the way. Right? Sometimes failing, but he just continues to get back up. And he always has this statement where he says, and that's my ninja way. That's my pledge. Right? that's my pledge.
Yo, that's the coin, and that's my ninja way.
Right? Right? That's his thing. Like, I'm going to fall, but I'm going to get back up. Right? And I'm going to keep going. And people begin to see him, and they're like, he doesn't stop. Every single time he falls, he legit gets back up. And he begins to pull people in because they're looking at and they're motivated by him. They see the passion in him, and they're like, wow, like, I hated this guy. I hated this cat. Look at him. Right? And so that village that hated him at one point ends up being inspired by him at the very end, until they're lifting him up as what? The village leader.
Right?
And like this, for me, this has always been one of those things. Like, I'll find myself in a bad place sometimes. I'm like, let me just go, check some Naruto real quick and just remember what it's like to lift yourself back up.
That's my ninja way.
Right?
That's my ninja way. Yeah, no. So let me ask you this, man. So if we're talking, okay, like, I think we've done a good job of kind of laying out a broad conceptual framework. The importance of masculinity, I think we've addressed in our own kind of oblique, nerdy way. We've addressed, redemptive masculinity. Let's get into what I know the listeners are really waiting for: the substance of masculinity, right? So we've talked kind of about, the broad contours of why it's important, why we should salvage it. We've even mentioned a few counter narratives, right? What some people feel like this about masculinity, and right. But when you think masculinity, right, what would you say is some of the substance of that masculinity? And my second question is perhaps an extension of the first. Is masculinity something that can express itself without femininity? Is it something that only expresses itself vis-a-vis women? Or is it something that has an expression that is, kind of inherent?
Yeah.
If I make myself clear.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say, actually, to the second question, all right, that I would say there's a bit of both. And I'm trying to remember the name of the book at the moment. There's a book on gender that I think Dr. Ustadh Ubaydullah actually used to mention quite a bit. But it was written by a professor. She actually studied in Iran. It was a Japanese woman, I believe.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Murata.
Yes, there we go. Yes. And I do remember, part of it, at least many of the lessons that I took away from that book, and just other discussions and just general Islamic studies and things like that, is you find, this concept of masculinity. You find it even in women.
Sure.
Right. You find it even in women, but it almost, really shines, if you will, right, when it's in front of femininity, right? When it sees its other half, it really comes into its own, if you will, right? So it definitely expresses itself 100% by 100% by itself, right? There's no question. Right, there's no question at all, but it definitely shines brighter, if you will, right, when it is in front of its other half.
Sure.
Right? And I think that's something that is important to mention. And going to your question about masculinity and what comes to mind when, for example, when I think of the foundation of it or the framework of it, etc., there are a few things that come to mind. One of them is discipline. Right? One of them is discipline. I'm growing up. I remember growing up in a time with a lot of manners, right? Concept of posture, concept of eye contact, right? And I think of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Alayhi
right?
salatu wassalam.
And, a lot of times when I would ask the question to people, even when I was looking for mentors myself, and I'd say, okay, well, how do I learn masculinity? How do I learn what it means to be a man? The answer was always what? The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right?
Sallallahu alayhi.
And, now in hindsight, when I look back, right, because at the time I'm like, okay, but I need something more tangible. Can you give me I understand I can open up a book of Sirah and I know I can look, but like, can you give me just give me the book with all of the answers? Just give me right. And when I talk about discipline, right, what I mean to say, and I mentioned these mannerisms, right, and I think of, okay, how when you read the Shama'il, for example, how was the Rasul said in terms of his posture, right? How was he in terms of his eye contact? When he got angry, what did he get angry over? Right? And what things did you find that he was patient in?
But see, I'm gonna push back.
Please.
The things you're mentioning, one could say that's not really a part of the rujula of the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, that's a part of the insaniya of the Prophet ﷺ. Because those makarim, right, those positive, praiseworthy traits of character that you've mentioned thus far are not unique to men. Discipline, posture, manners, etiquette. Those are not unique to men. Women also, embody those. So would you say when women embody those, they're expressing something of kind of a masculine archetype, which women do, and men express feminine archetypes as well? Or would you say those are not things that are distinctly masculine? Those are things that are just, good qualities and makarim, praiseworthy traits of character for human beings.
Yeah. No, for sure. You're correct in that. I would definitely say that across the board, that's definitely something that both men and women have and should aspire towards. They might express it differently, right? In different times, in different places, right? But 100% across the board. I think that as men, though, these are principles or tools that must be there in order for those innate, more masculine traits to really be expressed in the best way.
Okay,
right?
So these are foundational.
These are foundational tools, if you will, right? So even the concept of for example, ghira, right? Right. So this is something that oftentimes is spoken about when it comes to men, right? Like this concept
we should translate. We should translate objective jealousy.
Yeah. Right. And so this is often mentioned like, oh, men, men have this intense jealousy and et cetera, et cetera. And just the other day, I heard another story of, I think we've heard quite a bit of these stories actually of certain abuse and things like that in the Muslim community and around the world from men. But earlier I had mentioned the hadith of the Rasul Sallallahu mentioned, La taghdab, do not get angry. And I mentioned certain things about the Prophet Sallallahu and how he would get angry about certain things and he would have forbearance in certain things. And so this innate feeling of or this expression of jealousy that men typically have, I would say, across the board, can run loose if those foundations aren't there. Right?
I see.
Right? And can be dangerous actually. Right? Can become violent, can become physical, right?
Sure.
If those essential tools, frameworks, foundation isn't there. But when they are there, that masculinity, or what is, one of these things that is oftentimes associated with masculinity, becomes something that's protective, right? Becomes something that is, beneficial to the masses in general.
I see.
That's where I'm going with that.
I see. So it's almost like these fundamental qualities: discipline, self-control, continence, right? Was what this virtue used to be called, right? The ability to hold oneself together. Yes. These are kind of like the guards that keep some of those other primal masculine qualities, certain kinds of aggression, certain kinds of, even, right? أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفكون الدماء, right? Even
Yeah. Yeah.
the angel said, when Allah created Adam, will you place therein one that will make mischief? And one of the most interesting tafasir of that is that this addresses human propensity to corruption, right? Now, corruption is something that, believe it or not, often grows out of an anxious, unprincipled desire to provide good for oneself and one's loved ones. That's why people become corrupt. I am trying to increase my holdings. I am trying to make my children more comfortable. I am trying to leave a legacy for my family. I am trying, right, so greed, and we and political corruption is, not far
Whole
from
nother ball game. Yeah.
a whole nother ball game. But greed, corruption, the angels can see that potentiality in Adam, and then we have to call it demand, violence.
Exactly. Yep.
There's a propensity toward greed. There's a propensity toward violence. I was talking to somebody. I said, there you have a half of a verse in the Quran explain the whole human story.
Right there, right? Right there.
Right there. There's a propensity toward greed. There's a propensity toward violence. And men, just as history would have it, have been at the forefront of allowing those two qualities to run roughshod over all of our other moral commitments, right? Trying to amass power and the willingness to use violence to amass that power. And that if we don't have discipline, if we don't have self-control, if we don't have continence, then there you go.
Yeah.
It's a fait accompli, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So I know I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, one of the so on this discussion of discipline specifically, there was a conversation that I had in the Rijal group once, Rijal men, the men's group, and probably around, I would say 18, 19 years of age. And he responded that, I've grown up and I know for a fact that I don't have discipline, right? I know for a fact that there's no, I don't really, I haven't grown up in a life or even in a family where I've had to be very disciplined, right? Whether that's because everything has been given to me, right? Which, mashallah, there are a lot of very privileged young Muslim men in many of our communities, right? And they didn't have to go through a lot of maybe the difficulties that others, have had to, which kind of, created a sense of discipline that they needed to have in order to succeed, right? I forget the study that I was reading, but there was one study that had mentioned that by age 25 in the US specifically, that a lot of men at that particular time already had a home, family, children, and their education. Now, of course, this is obviously speaking about a certain demographic a lot of times, right? Because there's some demographics, as we know, that what house, right? Right. But the concept, in essence, is highlighting that there were a lot of road, milestones, I should say, right, that were achieved at a certain point. And in essence, you had to already be in a certain frame of mind, even as a young man, right, or have been taught, especially as a young man, that, hey, eventually, for example, you're going to have a child. Eventually, you're going to get married. Eventually, you're going, you need to, study this, and et cetera, et cetera. And so this young man would grow up with this roadmap, if you will, of the certain things that need to be achieved in order to be a man, if you will, right? And that discipline in order to get there, it goes into other areas of their life, not just I need to get an education. Well, what does it mean for even to go through school and go through university? It means you have to spend nights studying, right? You have to learn how to be a leader. So that's another, aspect there. right? I need to be a leader, so that means I might need to have a study group, which means I might need to set up the brothers and get them together and say, hey, we're not going to be playing here, we're going to be sitting down, and who's brought the notes, and there's delegation that's happening there. And these are very important tools and foundational bits that a man should have as well, right? Be a leader, right? Like we're not on, we don't have many battlefields that we're on right now, but you battle to finish your school, right? How many men do I know, young men that I mentor that have been in school for an additional 2-3 years, because they're kind of like, I'm just kind of figuring it out still. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, see, I think for our listeners, we would be remiss if we didn't link the crisis of kind of this loss of manhood to the marriage crisis that also exists in our community. Sure. Because I mean, it's clear to me that those two crises are kind of occurring, or you can graph them on the same axis. As there is a crisis of masculinity, there's also a marriage crisis, which is not to say, right, get my inner Kevin Samuels on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not with that. That's not my minhaj. Which is not to say, though, however, that women have no culpability. I'm not saying women have no culpability, but in my experience, and this could be anecdotal, it is the men that have proven themselves unfit, unsuitable, or uninterested in marriage. And what I think we fail to do on that front is we haven't modeled marriage and fatherhood as kind of this coronation or this celebration. It's almost like if you've been preparing for the test of being a man, this is the exam, right? This is your exam, right? Marriage, fatherhood. And it's something the best of you should be, you should be very wary, because there's a gravity, right? Mithaqan ghalidha, right? So it's a weighty covenant, right? There's a gravity. At the same time, a courageous man should be eager to rise to that challenge. And many of our men, they don't want it. They don't want it.
It's so I remember exactly where I was, Kulit Usuluddin, second floor, right? And I remember sitting in the class, we were going over, the professor just decided, he went on a little bit of a tangent, but he said, the hadith of Zawaj Nisfuddin, right? That marriage is half of one's religion. He said oftentimes the way people look at it, is once you get married, you complete, right? You complete your faith. And he said, I want to push on that, and I want to mention to you that, in fact, you spend your entire life learning your religion, and in marriage, you spend it practicing it.
Allahu Akbar.
That's like, whoa!
Yeah.
That's the other half, right? Because you're put in so many positions, situations where that forbearance, right? That patience, humility. That ghira, that jealousy, that humility, that leadership, every single facet of what it takes to be a man is tested there.
Allahu Akbar. Without a doubt.
All of it.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. But we have to get our men to want that. See, it's
want it, right?
Want it. Because it's almost like, right, it's like somebody would say, you're right. And that's why, I've been dating my girlfriend for the last 7 years, because I don't want.
Can't take that step.
I can't take that stuff, man. To really sit down and, be forced to reckon with what it means to be committed to a woman and to children, I feel more comfortable knowing that, in this relationship, there's a back door, trap door,
Yes.
some place to escape,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and a very easy escape, right?
When you can't and you're not willing and you haven't learned to face your own self, right? You don't want to deal with anyone else's baggage,
There you go.
right?
There you
You
go.
you
There you
you
go.
don't want to deal with anything else, right?
Mhm,
Because you haven't even spent the time looking at yourself, looking at your
mhm,
weaknesses, looking at your difficult, and saying, you know what, I need to work on these. Which is one of the reasons why you find this whole concept of a growth mindset, right?
mhm, mhm,
And you find that, and I'm saying this even as a man, that the most attractive men are the ones that have that growth mindset, are the ones who are like, you know what, I want to face adversity,
mhm,
right? I
mhm,
want to grow, right?
mhm,
And so I personally I feel you're correct, because even when I talk to a lot of the guys, they're like, I'm afraid of divorce. I'm afraid that I'm gonna put all this money into it, and it's not gonna work out.
mhm,
Like, just there's always something, right?
mhm,
And I hear you, right? I'm not here to undermine the fear that you might have, right? I understand that fear. I've been in that situation, and I'm sure many of us have been in that situation,
mhm,
right? But if growth is something that you want, if arriving at a place of true masculinity is something that you want, then look at the example, which I was even going to mention about role models, right? And how we need it. But again, look at the example of the great men of our tradition,
mhm.
right? Look at the example of our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
Sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
right?
Mhm,
and
mhm,
and 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 understand that one facet of many, but one very, very important facet in actualizing what it means to be a man, right? And working on the utilizing all the tools, right, that you've probably been learning in other areas of your life, is through marriage,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And shying away from it means you're shying away from actualizing the greatness that you could potentially have, right? That is
mhm,
there, that you're waiting to untap, that you have the keys to, but you can't. I mean, you can be scared, right? And it's okay, right?
mhm,
But the door is there, it's waiting for you. And the reality is, we live in a society right now where there's a lot of doors that are waiting for you, right?
mhm.
You have to take that opportunity. You have to take that step.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of something that my good friend, Dr. Bilal Ware, he said to me,
Mm.
he said to me, it's very important to recognize the difference between humility and self-doubt,
Hmm.
right? He said that humility is after one does what needs to be done, right? After one rises to the responsibility that demands our best. You ask yourself whether or not you could have done it better. You ask yourself whether or not you did it sincerely. You ask yourself whether or not you could have done it more efficiently, more effectively, whatever. Self doubt is always from shaitan, because the
Allah.
goal of self doubt is not for you to have muraqabah after having done something, not
Yep.
for you to be
Yep.
introspective after
Yep.
having done something.
Yep.
It's for you to be stultified. It's for
Mm.
you to be incapacitated so that you can't do anything.
Yep.
You see, so
Yep.
that
Yep.
you know. I don't think I
Yep.
can't. And he said, humility is from
Mm.
Allah, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ تَوَاضَعَ نَفْسَهُ لِلَّهِ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ.
Allah.
Whoever lowers, humbles him or herself for Allah,
Allah.
Allah will elevate them. Allah will
Yes.
raise them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
self-doubt is that kind of imposter syndrome, is I think
Yes.
kind of the, in the
Yeah.
contemporary idiom, right?
Yes.
That's always from shaitan. And the
Yes.
goal is always to incapacitate you. It's always to
Yes.
stop you from, I'm not worthy. I can't do it, right?
Yes.
And a lot of
Yes.
our young men, I think, um, they are suffering that kind of self-doubt, that kind of, imposter syndrome, if you will,
Yes.
when they think about marriage, I can't. I'm not. It's
Yeah.
too serious. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
I'm
Right.
not. I'm not the one for. I'm not ready for it. I'm not
I'm
the
not
one
ready.
for it.
It's,
Yep.
I mean, some cats are like, I'm just trying to get. I'm trying to get further in my career.
Yep. Yep.
I'm like, so I mean, so what's the goal here? To be a multimillionaire before you get? I'm trying to figure out, it's to get further in my career. Like I'm still not far in my career. I'm married. I got 3 kids. No, alhamdulillah, Allah has been overwhelmingly generous to me and my family. Alhamdulillah. But
Allah bless you.
I mean, it's something, it's something to think about. But in
Yeah.
the context of marriage, I want to
Yeah.
ask you,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm sure, some sisters, they want to hear about this, and some brothers as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you understand and how do you explain the ayah "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa"? What is
Hmm.
that? What does that mean? And how does that factor
Hmm.
into some of your reflections,
Hmm.
some of your
Hmm.
ruminations on
Hmm.
masculinity?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful question. It's a beautiful question, and I'm going to make sure I contemplate
So
my
the
answer
verse I
before I speak.
mentioned is, I didn't translate. The verse is, men are the maintainers, قوامون, yani men are charged with protecting and supporting. Qawam is really about support. Men
Yes.
are charged with protecting and supporting women.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
So one thing, on that particular ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions specifically that He has given certain things, right, to men,
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
some will say that it's more about a financial aspect of things, and they will just highlight it. That's it, right. This is how men are protectors and supporters of women, because they're the ones who've been given the obligation of taking care of the family from a financial perspective, and so thus that's it, right.
That's it.
But
Yeah.
that's a very rudimentary, I would say,
Mhm.
understanding of things, right. Um, you mentioned an example in the very, very, very beginning of this call that has stuck with me since then, and
Mhm.
I'll bring up now, which is what, right? Your daughter,
Mhm.
right, coming to you like, I'm straightening this out, right,
Mhm.
and
Right.
you responding in a way, right, which
Mhm.
either would make you a koam, a protector and
Mhm.
a supporter, right,
Mhm.
or the opposite,
ظالم.
whatever title we want to give it,
ظالم. يعني
right,
right.
a
Right.
volume, right,
Right.
and your wife, even going to a question here that came up, what do you think the role of women should be, can be in development of young men? I would say we can add that to even this question right here that you've given me, because what your wife did was remind you, right, that hold up, you're Koan, you're a
Mhm.
supporter.
Mhm.
You need to stay in that role right now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And you might feel like, okay, I can't handle this, right? I don't want to handle this right now, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that reminder, right, was a beautiful way of how going back to that how I said
Mhm.
earlier, how masculinity can find itself really honed and sharpened in front of femininity, right.
Mhm.
There's that
Mhm.
femininity of like, no, you need to be a supporter, I want you to be a supporter, and you being like, okay, you know what, I am that, that's exactly what I am, and that's what I'm going to do,
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
And so going back to, men are the protectors of women, I think in this is a great example of that you actually just went through, of showing us and showing your family just how, in a very practical way, right, a man can be a supporter and a protector of
Mhm.
the women in his life, right.
Yeah.
um and
Mhm.
as a father and the father of a girl, right, that
Mhm.
really spoke to me as well, right.
Yeah, no, mashallah, mashallah. And also to, I mean, to Sabria's question, I think that, um, when I'm thinking about how women can aid in the development of, young men, I think it is being comfortable enough with who they are as women to remind men of their obligation to them without feeling that there is any inherent inferiority in doing so. Right? I
Allah.
think, I think
Allah.
that this idea, and I might get some heat now. Here we,
Allah.
hey, look, I'm from the shy, and I'm here for all the smoke. Hey, whatever, let's go. But I think here,
Yeah.
and there are definitely socio-political reasons for this.
Yeah.
Within kind of the African American, historical experience. This trope of like the strong, independent woman, the strong, capable, independent, woman.
Yeah. Yep.
Is I'm not gonna say it's a necessity in some cases, right? If you for whatever reason don't have men that can offer that kawama, offer that support, I mean, things still need to get done. And I think that women should be commended. Women in our my life, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, right? Which is kind of crazy because which is kind of crazy, right? Because it's like, we'll have this conversation about masculinity, traditional masculinity, but in my house, I'm doing all the interior decorating, all the, but so I think women should be commended for, the way that they've stepped up. But I think sometimes there is an articulation of strong, independent womanhood that really leaves no room for the kind of masculinity we've been discussing.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll even give you a small example, actually. Just going out to eat at a restaurant, right? You sit down, you're with a woman, your wife, someone you're courting, whatever it may be, and you're sitting there, and the innate thing that a man wants to do is he wants to take care of things, right? He wants to maybe make the order, right? He wants to maybe pay the bill, right? And this concept of no, I got this. With like, of like, even like she might even be like, no, I'm paying, right? And going to what you're saying, it doesn't leave room. As a man, not only does it not leave room, but you're left feeling like, am I useful for anything? Like, what?
Yeah, it doesn't leave any room.
Right?
It doesn't leave any room.
Right?
Yeah, it doesn't leave room.
And I firmly believe, what is it? INDEP, that one, that independent song that came, right?
Independent,
right?
Sure.
It's really placed men in this situation, in this place of like, there is no need for me, right? And so our relationships are just purely transactional, right? I'm in and I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing more to it, right? Because you actually don't need me, right? There's no need for a relationship here.
But
right?
see the thing about that, Arthur, though, and this is again, I'm begging for hot water. I'm begging for hot water. I'm begging for it. I think this is a very this is, to use a fancy word, this is a kind of subterfuge. This is, the idea is like, okay, women have been liberated from devotion to their families, devotion to their husbands, but they have only graduated to being wage slaves for corporations just like men.
100%. No question.
So, this idea of, independence from what? Right? Independence from a man, a family, and children, but you're not independent. And I think that, there's a certain relationship between certain strains of that kind of rhetoric and just capitalism, man. It's just, it's almost like you feel liberated and independent because you are a wage earner, right? And you don't rely on your husband. But why don't we just kind of, broaden the lens? You're still probably reliant on a man. When you
100%.
look at the demographics in the business world, in the
100%.
corporate world, in the
100%.
academic world, you're still probably largely relying on. It's just not your man. It's just some man,
And you can choose, and you can
and you
leave.
can choose. It's
You can
just
switch
some man.
around.
It's
Yep.
some man, and somehow this makes it feel more liberatory. It feels more. I don't know. It's just a strange thing to me.
It just comes back to that concept of, well, I have the choice. I can do whatever I want. If I want to leave, I can find a new job. If I want to, do this, I can do. I can switch around as I please, right?
Sure,
And this
sure.
concept of, I would even say, because part of what I'm understanding and part of what I'm hearing as well is that it sounds like sometimes there's a commitment issue over there too,
Yeah.
right? Right.
You know
But
what I'm saying? So it's strange. Whereas I think back to my my sister Sabria's question, feeling no inferiority and being comfortable in your personhood, so that you can actually tell a man that this is where you need to step up. This is where I expect your support. This is where and you don't feel in doing so that you're taking a back seat or that you've
yeah,
become less than,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think this is of tremendous benefit
yeah, yeah.
to our community broadly and men specifically.
Yeah, there are two things I want to mention on that question as well, if you'll allow me. And one of them is on socializing young men. There's another rhetoric that's thrown around quite a bit aside from the independent, which is this concept of like, this is my king, right? And usually about young men, right? Especially in our community,
Sure,
right?
sure.
This
I
concept
used,
of
I used to be
maybe
a king. My wife demoted me to a jester.
but especially amongst especially like single women, for example, who have sons, this concept of like, this is my king, this is is it right, and not allowing that young man to really socialize and create social circles with other young men and other role models that he could potentially have, because in her mind, like, I got to keep him to myself, right? This is all I have. All right, this is all I have, and I'm going to keep him as close as possible to the point where I'm going to suffocate him. All right, and this is not all the time, but I would say that the concept of suffocating young men is in fact something that happens quite often, because you hear this a lot, especially in our Muslim community, especially amongst the immigrant community, right? Of this concept of just spoiled young men who have been suffocated their entire life, right? And so I do think that one thing is pulling back a little bit and allowing young men to be young men, right? To fall, to trip, to hurt themselves, and to in essence pick themselves up and to learn from those falls. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is a lot of young men live in the social media world, right? They live in the digital world, right? And it's not real.
No,
it's not real.
No,
right?
Terrible.
I remember, I talk to some people sometimes, and there's games where you create your avatar, you create your, and avatars are becoming very big now, right?
Sure.
Even more realistic than they were in the past.
Sure.
And in these games, you could have, you can create a male character, you can create a female character, you can dress it how you want to dress it, and things of that nature. And you'd find that you'd have a lot of young men who would create female characters sometimes, right? And for the novelty, whatever it is, right? But the issue here, and there was a Kuwaiti professor that actually wrote a piece on this, actually, where he was just talking about the harm that it causes when a person literally creates an entire life in this digital world. Right, creates their entire, they're anonymous, right? They, maybe they're now the opposite gender, whatever it may be, but they create this entire life. And what happens is they begin to see that world as reality, and it's not, right? The problems in that world, that digital world, becomes that person's real life problems, right? And it begins, it's everything they think about throughout the day, right? They prepare for it all of the time, right? And they then lose sight of what they need to be preparing for example, in the real world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the socialization that they need in the real world, and the discipline that they need in the real world, because the only discipline they have is
There you go.
in this,
The
right?
fantasy ball.
It's fantasy. It's fantasy,
Fantasy
right?
ball. Yeah,
And
fantasy.
so,
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that this so-called manosphere,
yeah, yeah,
red
yeah,
pill.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think that this discourse
Hmm.
is having a deleterious effect on young men. I don't like it.
Yes.
I don't like it.
Uh,
I mean, I think it's definitely a reaction to um, some of these, some of the misandry, right? Some of the misandry,
yeah,
some of the black male misandry, especially,
yeah,
that
yeah,
has really just run rampant,
yeah,
in the culture.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
I don't want to indict everybody that's in that space. I mean,
yeah,
like
yeah.
Dr. Tommy Curry, I really like.
Sure.
There are a few other speakers that I really like, but
Yeah.
once you get down to like the ground, I just think it's a very
Hmm.
vulgar. I think it's a very vulgar space, and I think
It is.
yeah, it's a very vulgar space, and it's a space where men are trying to assert the primacy of traditional masculinity by behaving in the most unmasculine. It's like making
But
women, like publicly humiliating women and making them cry and attacking them, and
it's
you
attractive though for a lot of these young men, and sorry, you just opened up
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Pandora's
yeah,
box right here, right? Because
for sure,
and some people, some sensitivities, some young men might get a little irritated with me right now, especially men from my own group, right? But they this is something they know I have a problem with, because you're right, when you break it down and you get to the core of it, it's empty.
yeah,
There's just nothing. There's nothing to it, and not to try. We got what, this Tate guy. We got
yeah,
Peterson. There's some
yeah,
people I
yeah,
don't even want you guys to look up, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But these people are there, and they're so attractive to young men, because in the mind of a lot of young men, this is all there is to masculinity.
Sure,
This is literally all there is. If I look good, if I can pull, as they say, right?
sure. Yeah, you still
If I can get
you've been saying that for a long time.
right,
Yeah, yeah,
if I can get the bread, right, then that's all that really matters at the end of the day,
yeah.
right? And and
Mhm.
and and, and because again, yeah, I guess it's part of it is inferiority complex, maybe, as well, that
Mhm.
some men have, like, of
Mhm.
of well, if I have those things, I can be somebody.
Mhm.
Right? Society will put me on the pedestal that I've always wanted to be on. Maybe.
Sure,
It's
sure.
honestly, to be honest, this is one of the things that I've even been struggling in communicating to a lot of young men, because the one of the things that they always mention is, well, we need role models, right?
Mhm.
And we don't see enough of them. The ones that we do see are these people,
Yeah.
right? These are the people, and but why is that the case? Because which world is the real world for them? The one that's
Mm.
digital, the one
Yeah,
that's social media,
the one that's
right?
online. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the only ones that they ever see, right, are those
Uh-huh.
people. They're not
Yeah.
in their communities. They're not in their society. They're not going to the barbershop and having
I
those
mean,
conversations.
funny thing is, man, I'll never forget this, man. This is how I knew that, like, this whole manosphere thing had really just grown to, nearly epic. I mean, it's crazy just how, or maybe I'm not using the right term, but it's. I was giving a lecture in a city that I won't name, and my wife and I were engaged in an exchange via text and phone, and it was a tense moment. Something was
Yeah,
going on.
yeah, yeah,
So in between like we stopped the lecture because we were going to pray, and then there was a little intermission, and I was texting with my wife, and a brother came to ask me a question, and I said, would you give me a moment, man? I'm communicating with the home front, got to get some things straightened out, and went back to sending my text. And he told a friend of mine, the imam couldn't answer my question because he was simping with his wife.
Yep. I already knew where that was going. Already knew where
He
that was
said
going.
the imam couldn't answer my question because he was simping. I
Yep.
said, dang, man, I'm just trying to
Yep.
maintain my little
Hold down the
family,
fort. Yep.
hold down
Yep.
my fort. And the
Yep.
young boy said I was simping. I
Yep.
said, man, this is, whew.
Yep. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
When you
said,
said that, I already knew where you were going because that is the default answer that I could hear any young man saying. It's like, oh, really? You're beholden to you got to respond right now because you have no choice, right? You got no choice because she got you
yeah,
at the throat, and it's like,
right. And I'm thinking like, man, I'm trying to, calm this woman, trying to settle things at home, still have to work, right? I've been hired to be here, so I still have to work. I'm conscious of that. I'm trying to
yep,
manage all of this, trying to
yep,
do each of them effectively, which in
yep.
my worldview
Hmm.
is like the essential quality of being a man.
Exactly.
Like trying to
Exactly.
provide
Yeah.
my wife with the assurance and the comfort that she needs and settle
Yeah.
things there, trying to do my work
Exactly.
effectively. I got a
Yep.
small intermission. Let me communicate with her. And
Yep.
he said, man, I tried to ask
Simping.
the exam a question. He was simping. I said, yo, I said, so if that's simping, then
Hmm.
what does it mean to be an actualized man?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And that's what I mean when I say just the toxicity of some of
Yep.
that garbage in what they
Yep.
call the manosphere,
Yep. Hundred
right?
percent. Hundred
Mm,
percent. And it's so harmful because in essence, just use that same example right now, right? If what is being said is that that's simping, right? So we need to be the opposite. That means someone at the end of the day has become a dhalim, right? Because
mm,
what's happening there? If you're getting this text, you're having this issue at home, right? You have to teach, right? And you're trying to take a few minutes to figure things out, make sure everything's settled so that you can give your full self in teaching. Okay.
mm, mm.
And the only way to be a real man is to say, woman, I ain't got no time for you. Right. And then to teach, what then happens to that woman?
Subhanallah.
What then happens to the children that come from that relationship?
Mm-hmm,
What happens to the
mm-hmm.
future generations? You just screwed everything up
Allahu Akbar.
because what? Because to simp, right? In
Mm-hmm,
this particular case, aka showing up for your family, right,
mm-hmm.
is not masculine.
Wow. Would you, I mean, imagine that. Imagine that.
Imagine it.
Imagine
Huh?
that.
Huh?
That I mean that always and the thing about it, the thing that I was most impressed with just in terms of just my own growth is that I didn't even take exception to it. I just laughed. I said, "Dang!"
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
said,
yeah.
"Hey, young fella, I'm just trying to, stay married, man. I just want the locks not to be changed when I get off the plane, young fella.
See,
I'm just trying to stay
but
married, man."
the response would be from a lot of people nowadays, from a lot of young men. It was like, okay, she can change the laws. You can go somewhere else. You own that home, don't you? Right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
it's
do
like
actually.
it's like, come on, man. Like, there's a meme or a thing where it's like, I don't want peace, right? It's like, yeah, you really don't want peace. Like,
La ilaha illallah. So I think that it's very important that we talk about balance and that
100%, 100%.
we really begin teasing out some of the substance of masculinity, because if
Yeah,
we don't, this ersatz, this faux, this counterfeit masculinity
yeah, yeah.
that's exaggerated, that is, that is probably an overcompensation for some
Hmm. Yeah,
perceived inadequacy on
yeah,
behalf of the men that espouse it,
yeah, yeah,
um, is going to take its place.
yeah.
So man, I can't believe it. It seems like we're just getting started. This is Arthur K. Richards and Ubaydullah with the Double Darkness part. This Double Darkness podcast. You know what I'm saying? Um, uh, you know, um, the Black Star podcast.
Black Star. Oh man, I remember that.
Oh man, look. You know who else is a Black Star? Who, me? You know what I mean? Man, it's really been enjoyable, man.
For sure.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
if I may ask, man, how old is my brother? How old are you?
I'm in my mid-30s.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So still, mashallah, a young man, man. But
Yes, yeah, for sure, for sure.
wise beyond your years,
I'm
and
trying.
amazingly composed and
I appreciate
settled.
it.
And
I appreciate it.
I really, really appreciated this conversation. Why don't you close with just any final thoughts, reflections? I mean, we were actually supposed to give people an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay. About that.
Yeah, kind of, forgive me. The back and forth was really, really intoxicating, satisfying, and I kind of lost track of the time. But I still want to give my guest, Ustadh Arthur, an opportunity to close out with a final thought, idea. Bismillah.
Um. So one the few things I would mention, and I'm just off the dome, right? Um. I learned a lot from reading, right? I learned a lot from reading. And I think one of the ways that men, the young men especially, can learn quite a bit of things that maybe they're not getting from the environment that they're in is by turning to books, right? And that's one of the reasons why I decided to work for Mecca Books to begin with, because I realized the importance of books. I mean, even in my own journey coming to Islam, it was through books. Right? Looking into my name Arthur and getting into Arthurian folklore and it completely changed my worldview. And there are so many books that really help. I grew up reading the Hardy Boys series. Right. Again, this concept of young men and they're growing and solving mysteries and these various things. Right. Like in that right. Loved it. Right. Huckleberry Finn. You have Narnia. You have The Giver. All these various things.
Love C.S. Lewis, man.
C.S. Lewis. Oh man. But these books. And recently, I was just doing some muraja, some review recently, and there was a statement in one of the books that I was reading that in essence said that the salik, the person on the spiritual path, and the talib al-ilm, the seeker of knowledge, they both end up always going through this problem of doing a bit and then feeling really good about themselves, right? So maybe they pray tahajjud a couple of nights and they're like, yeah, look at me. Right. Or they read a book or they get go to a class and they're like, oh, I know everything about the deen. Right. And the cure to that is reading about or learning about true mashayikh, true scholars of the religion, true people who conquered their nafs, right? And because it puts things into perspective. And so what I would say as well is reading about men, right? Men that you see as role models, right? Even you might not know them, right? But you can pick up a book, you can find books about them and reading about their lives. Recently, I've been reading this book called The Exemplars that we've been carrying, and it covers 8 contemporary, modern day Muslim traditional individuals. Some of them are scholars, like Sheikh Marabat al-Hajj, for example. Sheikh Sahih Jafari, who we know, especially got a little, affinity to, come from Cairo. Right? I always remember walking past the masjid there.
Yeah, right when you get off the bus.
Right when you get off the bus, exactly.
The masjid and the bookstore.
Right, exactly, the bookstore on the side. But reading about these men and their lives and how women also helped them in their journeys and how they helped and showed up to the women in their lives and how there's one woman in the series called Sayyida Fatima Yusrutiya, and how she continuously talks about her father's role in her life, right?
Mhm.
For her to become the woman that she became, and like reading these stories, and I'm like, see, that's what I need to have in my life, because I have a daughter, right? And you see how she talks so highly of her father, and I'm like, okay,
Mm.
yeah, these are the type of things that I need to have. um so I would say one thing I would say is reading, right? I would definitely say that reading is very important, and that should be something that is picked up. The other thing I started off and I had mentioned about meds, right? The muraqabah, the exercise, the diet, and the sleep. I stand by that, and I think it's something that's so very important. But I remember the first time that my one of my teachers told me, he said, "Look, I want you to write down your sins." He used to tell
Mm.
me this. He used to
Yeah.
tell us this in class. He said, "Write. I want you to write down your sins, and I want you to look at them at the end of the day. Just look at that piece of paper that you wrote them down on, and just sit for a moment with that. And in essence, he's telling us have some awareness, right? And by having that awareness of where you've gone wrong, and if the weaknesses that you have, right, it allows you to, one, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? There's no strength, there's no power except through Allah,
Except to
right?
Allah. Allah
And
Akbar.
so you need to recognize real quick that, look,
Mm.
all the growth that you wish you could have, that you want to have, you're only going to have if you strengthen that relationship with Allah first off,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so you need to learn where you need to truly look for support and for guidance and for help. It's not going to come from Tate,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? It's not, right? It's
Well,
going to come
it's
from
not even
Allah.
coming Jordan Peterson.
Not going to come from Peterson, not at all,
Mhm.
right? So you need to beg Allah Azza wa Jal to put the right people in your life, right? The
Mhm.
right guides in your life, and to give you the tools that you need to become the man and the mu'min that you need to be, right?
MashaAllah. That's a
So that's what
وختامه
I would
مسك.
say.
وختامه مسك. And it is sealed with musk. Okay, man, this has really been enjoyable.
Allah bless you.
I'll get your information and we can just resolve to
I'd
stay.
love to. I'd love to. I'd
Yeah,
love
we
to.
can resolve to stay in touch. Um, there has to be more collaboration that we can do
Inshallah.
on this and other topics, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Two
Inshallah.
words, love books, love reading. I really appreciated this, mashallah.
Allah
Well,
bless you.
I
Allah
look
bless
forward
you.
to being in touch soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Allah bless you. Allah bless you.
Allah bless you.
Barakallahu
Assalamu
feek.
alaikum.
Wa
Fiikum
alaikum
barakatuh.
assalam.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for joining us for this discussion this evening. I wanted to remind you that you can join the ALIM book club next week, where we'll be reading the book Futuwa by Imam Dawood Walid. You can continue this type of discussion there. If you visit alimprogram.com/book-club, you can register for the book club there, inshallah. And as well, I wanted to remind you that we're already taking interest for the summer program 2023. If you visit islandprogram.com/summer-program, you can sign up there. Like this summer, we had over almost 40 students studying topics such as sectarianism, Islamic intellectual history, the Sirah, Aqidah, and inshallah, you can be a part of that next year as well. So go ahead and sign up for our flagship program. You can have many engaging discussions like this with Muslims from across the country, have discussions with the scholars, and inshallah benefit greatly. Thank you all for joining us again this evening. I hope you benefited from this discussion. Assalamu alaikum.